we're harming them by not doing the right thing.
Right. We've had studies with older children who have had shared parenting or joint custody orders, and they statistically do better in school, have a more positive self-esteem, are less likely to be sexually active than in the sole custody parentally alienated child who is bombarded on a daily basis with you know why you're living with me, look what your dad does, your dad doesn't give us any child support, we have to eat out of the garbage, and then that child is so much more hurt because he doesn't have access to the other parent. So joint custody, if anything, would at least stem some of that, even if you're not going to stop mom from talking bad about dad or dad talking bad about mom. At least that child's going to know whenever the occasion is, I'm going to be with the other parent. So I think for that, joint custody is a positive thing.
And indeed, if it makes the agreement more stable, and I think, Sal, you were mentioning it, apparently you have access to some studies that have shown that in fact it does tend to eliminate parental alienation. It makes the child support function much more stable, much higher percentage of compliance there. You know, one of the things that we typically don't do when we advocate shared parenting, joint physical custody, is that we forget that what we're comparing this to is sole custody, not to the intact family where everything is doing swimmingly well.
Point, yeah.
What we're doing is comparing, you know, the stability of that kind of legal agreement with the sole custody legal, which is, I think, you agree with me, Sal, it tends to be very unstable, a lot of relitigation and so on.
Steve, you brought up the women's organizations before. What about their claim that fathers' rights groups just want shared parenting so they could get out of paying child support?
Well, I don't think that's
legitimate.
Again, with the statistic that Sal just brought up, the child support is much more stable, much more predictable. So, I mean, that solves that problem right there.
As Sal brought up also, he had a case now where the father had custody of the children, but even though the courts didn't acknowledge it, still in all, he had to continue paying child support to the mother, and the kids were living with him.
But he probably wouldn't pay the same percentage if there was shared parenting, right?
That's true, although that's kind of convoluted because you have to show that there's an extremely different amount of visitation. Extreme visitation is what they call it. And
liberal
you know,
visitation.
No, extreme, beyond that.
Oh, it's got to be beyond that.
Beyond
more than liberal visitation.
Liberal is every other weekend. And
in my case,
Tuesday,
he had, as we said, 82.7%, whatever it was. I mean, he was incurring all of the costs, taking the children to their baseball games and whatever. Their driver's licenses were registered to his house, incurring all of that and still paying child support to the wife, who now saw the children once in a while.
It's an interesting point. When fathers get custody, they are more likely not to seek child support.
That's what I found also.
Because they don't want to hurt the mother. They already got the kids. Why burden her further with this? And I tell guys, look, if she got custody, you think she's going to let you off the hook? I say go for it. Every time.
I was actually hired years ago to follow a woman mother who didn't have child support. Because she refused to pay $25 a month to the courts. She denied having a job, and I was hired to prove that she, in fact, was going to work. I found that astounding.
You know, on the positive side of all this effort, and contrary to the slap at the Bar Association, I have to get back at you for that. But, because the Bar Association is working very hard to try to push referees, mediators, and get a lot of these things done on consent. 155,000 custody orders in New York last year. That's an awful lot of work for courts to do and do it well.
That's right.
And so when they make the mistakes, you know, sometimes you can excuse them, not if it's my kid, not if it's my situation, of course. But I think the bar, certainly under our Chief Justice, has really tried to narrow some of these issues down into a more consent-oriented court system. So they've hired referees who are sitting there and trying to twist some arms and saying, settle these things, don't go to the mat with them. You're only hurting your kids and you're going to hurt your own pocketbooks.
Are these referees or mediators?
These are referees that the court is using who are judges in every sense of the word except for certain trial requirements, and mediators. There's actually a mandatory mediation program in some courts, not in Westchester, but we have voluntary mediators in Westchester, in which I volunteer for. And that's going a long way to, number one, taking the backload away. And number two, keeping the expenses down for all of the parties. And of course, keeping the emotional expense down for everybody, including the children.
155,000 cases, the majority of them, I'm sure, have to do with access enforcement or access denial.
155,000 custody determinations. Multiply that by however many the normal amount of children you have, and that's how many children were affected by this.
Wow. I know that for the children that we talk to, the older children who we can talk to, they miss that cohesiveness of parenting. They miss the two parents in the morning taking them off to school and stuff, and they resented having to go from house to house in the long run. So I think shared custody, joint physical custody, probably is going to be the single determining factor in a child's future growth and development, because it's going to ensure that child has access to both parents. Because sole custody, it's not working. Sole custody doesn't work, especially when one parent can mandate and dictate the who's and what's and where's, and there's no enforcement. Something that the courts, I'm sure, are looking into. They want to make it a crime. They want to make some sort of penalty, but they haven't done it yet. And that's, in our organization, the Fathers' Rights Association, that's the #1 issue. I pay my child support. Why can't I see my child?
Well, I'm glad we cleared that up, you know, the confusion about shared parenting tonight. I want to thank my guests, Efrain Rodriguez, President of the New York State Fathers' Rights Association, Stephen Metzger, a local men's advocate and a frequent guest on our program, and Sal Lagonia, attorney here in Westchester.
Thank you.
Tune on into our website for more information and other programs that we've done, and we also have some new items on the website as well. This is Tony Nazzaro saying good night from MensNet.
That's good we didn't get in that you guys are custodial dads.